Look at this sleek digital environment. Now watch as the camera moves, and the entire structure fractures into floating, unusable polygons. This structural failure happens because modern AI models do not actually generate 3D objects. They project 2D images onto a canvas using multi-view baking, which introduces severe geometric errors and broken textures. As long as asset generation relies on 2D image projection, industries needing precise spatial computing, like gaming and VFX, face a hard mathematical limit on automation. A joint research team from Tsinghua University and Microsoft Research addresses this exact bottleneck in their paper, Native and Compact Structured Latents for 3D Generation. To build automated, high-fidelity virtual worlds, researchers had to abandon 2D projections and design an architecture that natively computes spatial physics. The research team designed a new generation framework from the ground up to solve the spatial problem. This is the result. This jet engine and robotic catmech are generated at 1536 cubed resolution, represented by just 9,600 latent tokens. This output relies on three architectural pillars. The first is a data structure called the omnivoxel, or O-Voxel. The second is a sparse compression VE that shrinks the grid. And the third is a 4 billion parameter flow-matching diffusion transformer that generates the final asset. These three systems execute a bottom-up rewrite of how neural networks process and store 3D latent data. Standard 3D representations often fail when processed by neural networks. Traditional voxel grids operate like digital bricks. Rigid, they consume massive memory for very little detail. A common alternative is signed distance functions, or SDFs. It maps a solid sphere by separating the blue inside from the red outside. But when mapping a razor-thin leaf, it lacks internal volume and collapses, producing chaotic errors along the edge. This strict inside versus outside requirement prevents SDFs from generating complex, fully enclosed internal geometries, like the interior workings of a cockpit. Until an AI representation can natively interpret open and non-manifold geometry, structural realism remains mathematically impossible. The paper solves this topology problem by discarding continuous fields in favor of a flexible dual grid, the foundation of the O-Voxel. Instead of rigid blocks, this grid uses interconnected nodes that slide along fixed axes to align with highly complex geometric boundaries. To calculate their optimal position, the system uses a quadratic error function, or QEF. They modified the standard QEF by introducing a boundary edge penalty. This constraint forces the dual vertex to align precisely with edges, allowing it to capture razor-thin, non-manifold surfaces. These spatial nodes simultaneously hold volumetric attributes for the object's physical material. Each node embeds physically based rendering, or PBR, parameters. This includes base color, metallic properties, surface roughness, and opacity. By unifying shape and PBR data into one flexible node, the O-Voxel architecture natively generates translucent glass and precise textures without external rendering steps. Processing a 1024 cubed O-Voxel grid directly would instantly exhaust the VRAM of a modern GPU. This diagram outlines the sparse compression VAE, or SCVAE. This structure compresses the massive grid using a sparse residual autoencoding loop, avoiding the need for heavy 3D transformers. Traditional downsampling is lossy. It simply cuts data away. Sparse residual autoencoding folds spatial data inward. Mathematically, the system takes an 8-voxel spatial block and collapses it directly into the channel dimension of a single, highly dense voxel. To maximize parameter efficiency on this sparse data, the authors adapted conv-next style blocks, replacing standard double convolution layers with pointwise MLPs. This achieves a 16x spatial downsampling rate. A 1536 cubed grid compresses to roughly 9,600 latent tokens. This channel folding technique allows highly complex 3D structures to fit inside a computationally scalable latent space. With a compressed latent space established, the system uses flow-matching diffusion transformers, or DITs, to generate novel assets. The generation pipeline operates in 3 stages. Stage 1 uses a dedicated DIT to predict the sparse layout and structural occupancy of the asset. Stage 2 deploys a second deity to generate precise geometric latents inside those active occupied voxels. Stage 3 synthesizes the PBR material latents. Because this happens in the native 3D space, the material is perfectly aligned to the generated geometry. The model trains using a progressive scaling strategy, starting at 512 cubed resolutions and scaling to 1024 cubed, ensuring learned priors transfer across scales. To enrich the diversity of the output, the team utilized the text-first dataset, exposing the model to a wide variety of realistic PBR materials. Because geometry and materials are generated together in a native 3D environment, the output avoids the ghosting and tearing artifacts caused by 2D projections. The quantitative benchmarks confirm the architecture's efficiency against models like Trellis and Direct3D 3S. The O-Voxel model achieves significantly higher mesh distance and PSNR scores while operating on a fraction of the latent tokens. When we analyze this generated mech asset, we see the model accurately rendering enclosed internal mechanisms, like these detailed cockpit gears. The translucent glass dome is rendered with correct transparency, confirming that the embedded alpha channel inside the O-Voxel nodes operates as intended. These physically accurate internal textures sharply contrast with the blurred, ambiguous results often produced by traditional UV-based generation methods. These benchmarks demonstrate that native 3D flow matching outperforms 2D generation pipelines in precision and efficiency. However, this system has physical hardware requirements. Uncompressed 1536 cubed grids demand massive amounts of VRAM, currently restricting this resolution to enterprise-grade GPUs. A logical next step for this research is introducing a temporal dimension to the O-Voxel latents, which would enable natively generated 4D animations. To summarize, O-Voxel replaces rigid isosurfaces with a flexible dual-grid modeling, open and enclosed topologies. The SCVAE achieves a 16x spatial compression rate by folding spatial data directly into channel dimensions. Native 3D flow matching eliminates the need for multi-view baking by generating geometry and materials simultaneously. For daily breakdowns of the latest AI research, like this video and subscribe for more. By unifying geometry and materials in a single, sparse latent space, this research provides a path toward asset generation operating natively in the 3D domain.